Hi, everybody. I see that the attendees are kind of rolling in. That's awesome to see. That's great to see. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Ooh. Ah, just little technical difficulties. Did you do that? All right, back to normal now. Cool. I think all of our panelists have joined us too. So yeah, well, hey everybody. Good to see you this afternoon. Thanks for joining us for a conversation about electric bikes. Feel free to say hello in the chat or to just kind of drop in a line, tell us who's here if you're feeling into that. Our team's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions or trouble or anything like that, feel free to post it in there and folks from our team will be able to help you out. But I'm Elise Daniel. I am the general manager for Nashville BCycle, the bike share system that's been around in Music City for the past 10 years and counting. And our other host today is also Walk Bike Nashville. Yeah, Lindsay's joining us from Walk Bike Nashville on the panel to be chatting with us. But yeah, they also say hello and are glad that you are here as well. But this will be a moderated panel discussion about electric bikes, e-bikes, what they are, who's riding, and why it all matters. We'll also have some illustrations going from Ayumi Bennett. So you can pin her post, the visual kind of illustrated notes that'll be happening. You can pin that in on your screen. We'll be able to share it a little bit too. But yeah, that's something, and we'll be able to share those afterwards along with the recording of today's session. But yeah, I think that we're going to get started here, but I just wanted to also let you guys know that there is a Q&A section. So as questions come up, or if there are things that you'd like to know more about from the panelists or from anyone on joining us today, then feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A and we will kind of go through those at the end of the session. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and kick things off and I will introduce our moderator. Michael Briggs will be our moderator today. Michael has been the Assistant Director of Mobility at Vanderbilt University since November 2019. He works with staff throughout the university to align mobility planning goals outlined in MOVE-VU, Vanderbilt's Strategic Transportation and Mobility Plan. Previously, he spent nearly a decade with Metro Planning, which eventually led to its new multimodal transportation planning division. And Michael spent 2 years as the county planner for Sumner County, Tennessee, and 4 years as transportation planner at the Mid-American Regional Council in Kansas City. He began his transportation career at the Barren River Area Development District in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Elise. I really appreciate this opportunity and you helping to organize this with Walk Bike Nashville today. So I think we're going to have a really good discussion. I'm excited to moderate the panel and also myself learn more about e-bikes. And I think Vanderbilt is really interested in this because we experience a lot of the challenges and see some of the behaviors that come up when there's conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists and other modes of transportation on a lot of our paths. And so that's something that, throughout the city is a concern. And we're fortunate enough to have a couple of BCycle docking stations near campus and one also in Centennial Park. So this is very timely discussion. And we hope the conversation today will be helpful in thinking about just transportation and how it's changing in Nashville. So I'm going to take a moment to introduce the panelists. We've got three really great people who are going to talk with us today and kind of have a bigger discussion on this topic. So the first panelist is Lindsay Ganson with Walk Bike Nashville. And she joined the staff in 2019 as Director of Advocacy and Communications after serving on the Walk Bike Nashville board. Prior to being with Walk Bike, she was an account supervisor at MPNF Strategic Communications. And her clients there included the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Planning Department Transportation Demand Management Program. She also led MPNF's client team for the multi-year public outreach efforts for In Motion, which was a big strategic transit plan for WeGo, both at the local and regional levels. Before being in Nashville, she was Chief Operating Officer of Transportation Alternatives in New York City. And that's where she led grassroots campaigns to improve transportation policies. And then she's also served as Chief of Staff with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection and the manager of NYC Company, the New York City Convention and Visitors Bureau. She's a Brooklyn native and holds a bachelor's degree from Georgetown. So welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you. Glad to be here. And just wanted to say we're super excited about e-bikes and their potential to transform the way that people move around Nashville. We don't consider them cheating. You know, you might hear sometimes it's cheating. It's not. We've really heard from a lot of different people over the past year collecting stories of Nashvillians who are using e-bikes. And what we've really learned is that e-bikes are helping Nashvillians go farther, do different kinds of trips on e-bikes, and also really expanding who can bike, who can use the Greenways, and who can access our growing bike network. So we're really excited about BCycle here in Nashville now with a pedal assist e-fleet, and we're really excited for e-bikes to keep growing and to increase access to e-bikes all across the city.
Thank you, Lindsay. Our next panelist is Dr. Chris Cherry, and he is professor in civil engineering at the University of Tennessee. And his research has centered around the intersection of policy, technology, travel behavior, safety, and sustainability within the transportation sector. His past and current work spans the globe with projects in Asia and in the US, focusing on low impact transportation modes like e-bikes. And much of the work of his career has aimed to understand the role of lightweight electric vehicles in the transportation space. He started with his PhD dissertation on e-bikes in China from UC Berkeley in 2007. He currently directs the light electric vehicle education and research initiative, or LEVER, and is a principal investigator on several ongoing projects focused on safety of vulnerable road users such as pedestrians and those using micromobility options. These are funded with the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Transportation Research Board, and with the Tennessee Department of Transportation. So let's please welcome Dr. Chris Cherry.
Thanks, y'all. I'll chime in as we go along, but yes, I'm a researcher and I look at e-bikes and all manner of new emerging technology and where they fit into our system. So this is my area of interest and research, and love to work with folks on all sides of the table to answer those questions.
All right, thank you, and welcome to the panel. Excited for this discussion. Our next panelist is Ash Lovell, and she leads People for Bikes, electric bicycle policy and campaign initiatives. And so prior to joining the People for Bikes, Ash brought people together to work on big social and environmental projects, including urban sustainability and large landscape conservation for the National Park Service. When she's not working with industry partners and advocating for e-bike access for People for Bikes, you can find her riding around the Front Range of Colorado on her electric cargo bike with her two little boys in tow. And that sounds like a lot of fun right now, particularly with spring weather kicking in gear. I got spring fever really bad. So please welcome Ash.
Thank you, Michael. I would love to have some spring weather. It is currently dumping snow. I'm in Boulder and I am over it. No, I'm not. We always love snow. But thanks so much for having me. I'm super thrilled to be here with this great panel. Chris and I work together on a weekly basis, so it's great to see you again, Chris. And yeah, so I direct all things related to e-bikes for People for Bikes, which is the bicycle industry trade association. And as you probably know, e-bikes are a big deal for the bicycle industry, and getting to be an even bigger deal in the US. So thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. And we're actually going to, I think, toss it back to you to give us a little bit of an overview on e-bikes, some general information. So we're all working from the same page in terms of our thinking around this form of transportation. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Yeah. And I'll just ask you to update the slides or change the slides when I ask. Yeah, perfect. That's great. So People for Bikes, as I mentioned, is the bicycle industry trade association. We represent almost 300 different bicycle manufacturers, and we're nationwide, and we have about 700 different retail members for People for Bikes and over 1 million different individual rider members for our organization. So I am very thrilled to get to work with the industry. As Michael mentioned, my background is in land conservation. I worked for the Park Service for a long time. I have a PhD in environmental sociology, which who knew that would lead me here? I'm really thrilled it did, but I'm so excited that electric bicycles are taking off in the way that they are, because they really seem like a solution to a lot of the different issues that we're dealing with in the US right now. So People for Bikes has a big vision for where we're going in the future, and our goal is to be the best bicycling nation in the world. We have 3 different kind of plans for how we get there. The first is infrastructure. So recognizing that it's way better to ride when you have protected bike lanes, when you have connected paths and trails and roads. So our goal is to accelerate the construction of safe, fun, and connected places to ride. We are also promoting policy at all different levels of government, local, state, and federal, to advance pro-bike and pro-bike business legislation. And then finally, reducing barriers to access and welcoming more people to the joys of bicycling, whether that means helping people, get a bike for the first time, encouraging electric bicycle incentives so that they're more accessible for more people. We know that participation is a big deal. We're thrilled with the amount of participation we've seen in the bicycle space over the last few years. It's been one of the few silver linings of the last few years, and we want to make sure that we can maintain that. And we really feel like e-bikes are a great way to keep that ball rolling, or those tires rolling. Next slide, please. So I give this talk a lot. I think it's really important to be very clear about what an electric bicycle is. So they're really not that different from traditional bicycles, as we call them in the e-bike space, acoustic bicycles. There's 3 different kind of components. The first is the computer, which you have on your handlebars, and it helps you figure out, okay, how fast are you going? How much boost are you getting, whether you're pedaling or using the throttle? It kind of helps you monitor that. How far have you gone? That type of thing. The battery is generally a lithium ion battery, which are very safe and used across multiple different industries. We actually just launched an electric bicycle battery recycling program through People for Bikes, which will take your battery at the end of life and recycle it back into the stream. Very, very exciting stuff. Let me know if you want to know more about that. And then the motor, is engaged either when you're pedaling with pedal assist bikes, or when you use the throttle with throttle assist. And so I'm going to go into throttle versus pedal. Class 1, there's 3 different classes that outline 3 different kinds of electric bicycles. Class 1 is pedal assist, meaning that you only get help when you're pedaling, and the max speed that you can go up to is 20 miles an hour with a class 1 electric bicycle. Class 2 is throttle assist, meaning you have a throttle on the handlebar that can help engage that motor. And the maximum assisted speed for class 2 is also 20 miles an hour. And then class 3 is back to pedal assist again, no throttle, and the maximum assisted speed is 28 miles an hour. Those are generally used for road commuting, long distance road commuting. And each of these has different benefits and different uses. So just wanted to give a quick overview of, what is an electric bicycle as we kick off this conversation. I think I'm ready for the next slide. And I wanted to talk a little bit about just how big this electric bicycle wave is. The value of the electric bicycle retail market has tripled over the past 3 years. I will say it again. It has tripled over the past 3 years, growing from 236 million in 2019 to 770 million in 2021. And while traditional bicycle prices have been steadily climbing over the past few years, the average electric bicycle sold in 2021 was less expensive than in 2019. So we know that these products are generally more expensive than traditional bicycles. They have, these component parts that we just talked about that are, more expensive to produce. And we really want to make sure that these bikes can get into the hands of as many people that want them, can be affordable for bike shares. There's a lot of different ways to access this new and innovative technology. And it's really interesting to see kind of how the market is evolving. Next slide, please. So again, the last few years, we've seen an incredible uptick in outdoor recreation in general. Bicycling has been a huge piece of that. We've seen with traditional bicycle sales that there was a big spike at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's kind of going back down again, but still higher than it was before the pandemic. With electric bicycle sales, they're just continuing to rise. Granted, like if you look at those numbers, it's a smaller percentage of the full amount of sales of electric bicycles, but the projections are that this is just going to keep growing. Next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. If it's not, we'll just keep talking. But I wanted to also outline, as I go through those 3 different classes, class 1, 2, and 3, People for Bikes and our industry partners have been working for the last 7 years to introduce this Model 3 class legislation at the state level, because it's at the state level that these codes are kind of put into legislation. So in this model legislation, it really lays out, what is an electric bicycle? What are these 3 classes? We currently have 36 states that have this model legislation on the books, and 42 states that have acceptable legislation that basically identifies that an electric bicycle has the same ability to ride, same kind of classification as traditional bicycles. This is a big part of my work, working on policy, is getting all states to have this similar kind of classification system. And it's also recently introduced in the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure bill as well. So we're really getting to a point where this understanding of what an electric bicycle is pretty ubiquitous across the US. Is that the end? Let's see. I think so. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Yeah, it looks like that's the end. So that was a really good overview on e-bikes. And I have to say, so when I worked with the planning department and lived in East Nashville, I would trudge up a hill both ways, no matter which way I went. And e-bikes were not common then. And this would have been a fabulous way to get to and from home, and I would have arrived a lot less sweaty into the office, particularly during the hot summer months. So it's just kind of interesting to think about how quickly the technology has changed in this space, and to think through the different implications it has for infrastructure, for behavior on streets and on pathways around the city. So a really good overview. So I know questions are coming into the chat, and I think we both have the graphic recorder, which is also fun to see, documenting some things. And we've also got a team behind the scenes tracking some of those questions, and we'll get to some of those here in just a second. But I do want to start out with talking about how e-bikes are sort of opening up bicycling for more people. And I'm curious, given kind of your 3 unique perspectives, what do you see as being the benefits and advantages of electric bikes for riders? And why do you think more people are beginning to choose riding e-bikes and why now? And I think, we're getting to some of that with some of the cost implications because it is becoming a little bit more affordable. And so Lindsay, I'm curious, just since you deal a lot with advocates and people who are kind of already interested in bicycling, what are you hearing from people?
Yeah, so we actually did a project over the past year asking people to tell us their e-bike story, why they're riding an e-bike, why it's important to them, and specifically honing in on how they're using e-bikes in our Greenway system. And I think when we look at the biking infrastructure we have in Nashville, we could always use more, and we want more, and we want it built faster, and we want more protected bikeways. But we really do have a lot of good connections, especially our Greenway system. A lot of new lanes, newly protected lanes have happened over the past 5 or 6 years. So there are really a lot of opportunities to enjoy bicycling within even the urban core of Nashville. So when we asked people to tell us their e-bike story, we heard a lot from older riders, people that thought their bicycling days were done for whatever reason and were able to hop back on a bike because of an e-bike. Newer riders, people that felt a little bit unsure, and this is especially important in a city like Nashville where we have so many hills, and we also have pretty extreme heat in the summer, and also some aggressive driving. So I think the ability for newer riders to get a little assist going up a hill when they might be tired or dealing with some honking horns behind them, I think adds a important bit of confidence when you're just starting out riding on Nashville streets. And that sort of goes with newer riders maybe being concerned about not being sufficiently fit. We heard from a number of couples too, which was really fun, like one partner that couldn't quite keep up with the other partner, so the other partner got them an e-bike and now they're able to bike together. So that's really fun. I think brings a lot of joy. We heard from a lot of parents like Ash that are trying cargo bikes and trying to cart kids in a trailer. That's especially true on the Greenway, and having that little e-assist means you can have a lot more fun, I think, carrying your kids around town. And then what really surprised me is that we heard from a lot of Nashvillians who are recovering from illness or injury. So people who, cancer survivors, arthritis, just in some cases like more athletic injuries, but people that were really struggling to keep the level of fitness that they wanted to and really enjoy the outdoors, and found that an e-bike allowed them to do that when they didn't think it was possible for them anymore. So for all those reasons, I mean, I just think an e-bike makes bicycling more accessible, more fun. I mean, and then I think the other element too is stepping away from recreation is transportation. So we did hear from a lot of commuters too. Our extreme heat in the summer, the hills, means that people that want to try bike commuting, if they have the option of using an e-bike, means they don't necessarily need to have changing facilities or wear athletic gear or different clothes, that they're able to do a longer commute in all weather and all seasons because they have an e-bike. So I think we're just skimming the surface of what we could see in Nashville with building more infrastructure and increasing accessibility to e-bikes through BCycle and a bike share system. I think we're really just scratching the surface. So
yeah, and I have to say, so we worked with Elise, and this was right as she came to Nashville over this past summer, and got a test demo of the e-bikes on campus, and I sent out just a few staff and at leadership level. I was actually surprised at the number of people that came, and these are people that came to the demo, and these are people that do not bike. A couple of them actually told me they had not been on a bike in probably 20 years and found it really easy. And so I definitely am seeing that first-hand kind of reaction, I think, as people get on e-bikes for the first time. So but it's really good to hear that you're hearing some different perspectives. Dr. Cherry, are you seeing anything in the research that you're doing around micromobility as to why more people are choosing e-bikes?
Yeah, thanks for the question. When we think about cyclists and cycling in urban areas, there's a group of folks like me and maybe Ash and others on this panel and on the call that are kind of comfortable riding bicycles in urban environments. But there's this big group, about 2/3 of the population, that would love to ride a bike if many of the barriers that are in front of them are taken away. And there's been a number of studies that have looked at these different typologies of riders. And when you look at that group, this is again 2/3 of the population. They say, I won't ride a bike because of distance. I won't ride a bike because of terrain, as we heard just a minute ago. And then there's also safety and infrastructure and other things. So as we try to see how to get more people on bikes, and I think the common goal here is that we see that there are definite benefits to getting people on bicycles and on e-bikes across the board, across health, across greenhouse gas emissions, everything, mental health and physical activity and rehabilitation of injuries and all of these things. We want to try to knock down those barriers, and some of those barriers get knocked down by an e-bike. And we're seeing that people that ride e-bikes are folks that are traditionally inhibited by those barriers. So I think that's the most important part about e-bikes. It goes hand in hand with safe infrastructure, separated greenways and paths that are away from traffic. A lot of the folks that are in this group are not comfortable riding in arterial highways or streets that have high speed, high volume traffic. So that having that safe infrastructure is fundamental. Nashville, I know, has been growing pretty dramatically. It's bicycle infrastructure, it's safe bicycle infrastructure, and that kind of feeds right back into overcoming some of those barriers. So I think that's the main finding. And also people, to the point of e-bikes providing really kind of a high utilitarian, not to use that word to in such a weird way, but very they're the utility vehicle of the two-wheeler, essentially. Okay, you can carry more things with them, you can go farther, you can make trips that stop here and there, you can carry kids with them for that matter. So it's taking bicycling out of this very niche, you might say, group of riders that are either Sunday riders or they're, you know, hardcore commuters, and expanding a lot more across the board. And as e-bikes get cheaper, I was very happy to hear Ash say that the unit price of e-bikes are getting more affordable. It becomes something that's far more accessible to the general population. People can afford it more. As e-bikes enter the bike share systems, I think this is really important to that suddenly everyone can have access to an e-bike. You don't have to be able to afford $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 bicycle to be able to try it out. And if you may find that this is the best thing ever, I'm going to buy my own, I'm going to invest in my own e-bike. Or you may be able to use the bike share bikes as a sort of daily user. So
yeah, so it sounds like your cost is one thing that's contributing to this expansion. It sounds like people's ideas and thoughts about bicycling are maybe evolving, and that there's maybe a set of individuals that are interested in this but maybe haven't stepped out there. So those are really good trends to kind of keep in mind as we talk about this technology. Ash, is there anything that you want to add to why e-bikes are growing across the nation?
I think Lindsay and Chris covered a lot of it, but one thing I will note is that if you haven't ridden one yet, the joy that you get from riding an e-bike is unparalleled in terms of transportation. Like we call them joy machines because they are so fun to get on. You feel like a superhuman. You're still on a bike, like you're still out in nature. You're still getting the mental and emotional and physical benefits of being on a bike. But man, I live in a very hilly area as well in Denver, and it is just so great to get that little bit of boost and be like, oh, I'm going to get up this hill and I'm not going to be absolutely dying at the top of it. And I'm going to be able to go farther than I would have wanted to in the past. So I think the joy doesn't just happen when you own an e-bike. It can happen when you're using bike share. And I would say one great benefit of bike share, this is true for acoustic or electric bikes, is, you don't have to worry about the maintenance of these bikes or the safety in terms of storing them. And I think that's just like a huge benefit for any city that institutes these e-bike shares.
Very good. So both of you brought up, I think, a couple of points about safety, both from kind of conflicts with other vehicles, and I tend to be a bicyclist that will usually take the longer route just to encounter less traffic, just because that's what I'm more comfortable with. Whereas I know some people will get right in there on a main road and begin bicycling. So when we're thinking about infrastructure, both on our streets, also paths and greenways, what kind of safety issues begin to arise with our infrastructure? And are there any best practices that we're seeing across the U.S. where e-bikes are maybe changing how cities are thinking about their different biking facilities? So Dr. Cherry, I thought that might be something that you could chime in on.
Yeah. So first thing is that a lot of cities are embarking on plans to make their infrastructure safer, period. And a lot of those investments on the bicycling side are going to take a long time to build out throughout the entire network. So I think that that's a really important context. E-bikes, it's nice that you and I have the ability to kind of meander through a network and get to some safe infrastructure. And so an e-bike helps us do that because we can go a little farther out of the way and not have to take such direct routes. And we actually did some of that with our early work on kind of what routes e-bike riders are taking versus conventional bicyclists. And the challenge, though, is that, it could be that e-bike riders are safer, feel safer when they're riding in streets that don't have infrastructure because they can keep up with that traffic. And to the extent that we're not building bike lanes on every street in Nashville today or tomorrow or next year, we need to have some sort of ability to provide mobility that's sort of can keep up, I guess you might say. And I think this is one of the reasons that some of the surveys have looked at e-bike riders. Female e-bike riders feel safer on e-bikes, in part because they can keep up with traffic in a way. And so that some of our surveys found that was an important aspect of e-bike use. So there's a lot of complicated, nuanced demographics and other things as it relates to e-bike riders. Going farther to get to good, safe infrastructure is an important part of it. The ability to sort of get further away to access more of the network. But the other part of it is the ability to kind of stick with traffic on our roadways that we have. I'm not necessarily saying that we should slow down our pace of infrastructure growth because e-bikes solve that problem. That's not an ideal, but it is like in some ways a stopgap, if you will, or a way to make the infrastructure more accessible to more people in that sense. Okay, so I think that those are important things. And I just want to say, while I have the chance here, that e-bike riders and e-bike safety is not substantially or even statistically, if you want to go there, different than conventional bicyclists. And we could talk about all the nuance of different types of injuries and so on, but at the high level, if we're going to sort of draw a line, e-bike safety is pretty much one-to-one correlated with bicycle safety. I'm not saying that we need to ignore either of their safety. We need to look at both bicycle and e-bike safety. We need to build safe bike infrastructure. We need to provide safe access to infrastructure for both modes. Okay.
So that's a good point. And I think, bringing up the ability for an e-bike maybe to keep pace with traffic is interesting to think about. And then, I kind of look at it from the Greenway user perspective. I'm out, walking my dog on a Greenway or running, that perspective sort of flips in that I've now kind of in the role of being kind of like the bicyclist out on the street, whereas the e-bike user maybe feels more like the car going past you. And so I'm curious, Ash, just around paths and greenways, this issue I think keeps emerging here in Nashville as a concern. And so are you seeing some other cities talk through some of these policies on their paths and on their greenways related to e-bikes, like around speed limits or even bicyclist behavior that might get at this issue or this concern around sharing paths like that with other users?
Yes, the answer is yes. There's quite a few cities that are kind of looking at this, and I'll back up a little bit and just give a little bit more context. There is such an incredible boom in outdoor recreation happening right now. We've seen amazing numbers of increases of participation of all kinds in outdoor rec. The Outdoor Industry Association just came out with a study a few months ago in terms of, what does overall outdoor recreation look like in the country? And 7 million more people got out and recreated last year in the great outdoors than did the year before, according to Outdoor Industry Association. So it's not just that there's more e-bike riders, it's not that there's just more riders, it's that everyone is out using this recreational infrastructure. And how great is that? It's a wonderful issue and something that we want to be able to maintain. And there's definitely communities that are talking about like, okay, what do we do? This is the latest kind of mode of transportation. E-bikes are the latest and greatest thing to kind of hit these trails. And there's multiple different kind of conversations happening. One is we need more recreational infrastructure. The way to maintain everybody having a good time is to make sure that we have more trails and more protected paths and more greenways. And obviously building those takes time, and that's one important piece of it. Another piece is that according to Outdoor Industry Association, a lot of these new people that are out in the great outdoors are quote unquote beginners, people who, have not climbed a lot or biked a lot or hiked a lot. And so those etiquette kind of understandings of, oh, okay, pass on the left and call that out. And, this is what you do in a more congested area. Those are things that, people need to better understand of all users. So what we're seeing is congestion in a lot of these cities. And I think the thing that we at People for Bikes talk about a lot is just, how do we improve infrastructure and how do we do better education for all trail users on, what are these best practices in terms of etiquette and usage. So there's a really great example here in Colorado. Jefferson County, which is where I'm sitting right now, did a great kind of case study on potential user conflicts and what it would look like to introduce electric bicycles on not just shared paths, but kind of all different kinds of recreational infrastructure. And this study was excellent. And they came out with a finding that, yeah, okay, let's try it. And there have been very few incidences in Jefferson County. You really see, as Chris said, e-bikes generally ride like bikes. So we've got, if people are interested, I'd love to kind of share those resources out as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. So I'm sure some folks who are on the webinar will be interested in learning more. And I'm one of those who got back outside a little more during COVID. So I picked up disc golf, which is not bicycling, but you begin to learn some etiquette and things that you may have not thought about once you get out there and do it. And you get to meet some great people. And so I'm one of those that have probably led to the trend of people being outdoors, and it's great to see others out there too. Lindsay, so before we get into Q&A from those who are on the webinar, I did want to check back in with you because, being here in Nashville, we've got a lot of population growth and a lot of changes that are happening very quickly. And so what do you see as being the role that e-bikes can play in getting people around town in the future, particularly given that traffic congestion is going to continue to increase just because there's more people here than there was 10 years ago?
Yeah, there's lots of great conversation happening on the chat, and I definitely saw someone mentioning sort of the old iteration of bike share and it coming back now, and it's great to see it continuing. I mean, I think the thing that I'm most excited about when I think about how e-bikes can make Nashville a better city is the potential of bike share and shared bikes and shared mobility devices, whether it's docked or dockless. I prefer docked, but I think there's a huge opportunity in Nashville for those first mile, last mile connections, both for transit, but also for, carpooling and parking too. Like, I think we have a lot of opportunity to integrate a bike share fleet with our transit system and really expand our ability to move around the city in ways other than driving around by yourself. And I am really excited to think about that. A lot of cities during COVID saw a huge growth in their bike share system and people that wanted to use bike share for all different kinds of reasons. And during that time in Nashville, we packed up our bike share system and had to shut the whole thing down. So it came back last June. There's just so much opportunity in the future to think about where we're siting those stations, how we're integrating it with transit, how we're integrating it with our bicycle network planning. So where we're putting down new greenways, and where we're putting down new on-street bike facilities, particularly the low stress kind, the protected kind that really keep people separated from traffic. So I'm really excited to see what, BCycle hasn't even been here a year yet, and with the e-bike fleet. And so I'm excited to see how they can expand and hopefully how we can increase public support for a bike share system, because I just think it has a huge potential.
And I think you bring up a good point too about connectivity to the other transportation modes, and that becomes kind of a seamless system. You don't begin to think about you're only commuting by car or by bus, that you got to walk and you got to get on the bus, and then you may have your bike with you, and you take your bike to the last little bit up to your building. And so I think we're just now kind of scratching the surface in terms of thinking about our commuting behavior in that way. And there was a billboard about being traffic in Nashville that was up, that like, you are traffic, you're part of the problem. And so the more that we have people using transit, biking, walking, that's another space that a vehicle can occupy. So it's kind of a win-win as well for drivers and motorists when other people are using other transportation. So Chris or Ash, do you have anything that you want to add to this as well?
Yeah, I'll just chime in on that. We launched a research project back in 2011 and 12, which was actually the first electric bike sharing system in the country. And it had a mix of electric bikes and conventional bikes. And what we were hoping to do was look at some of these connectivity issues, look at how different riders operated on different types of infrastructure. And surprisingly, what we found is actually the e-bike riders rode slightly slower, but slower on greenways than conventional bike riders did. Even the same riders. So we knew who was who, and it was a research project, and we tracked all their trips and so on. So we were able to through that process show, again, e-bike riders and conventional bike riders operated very similarly. Some of the thoughts or theories about why a e-bike rider would ride slower on a greenway than a conventional bike rider are related to issues of maybe recreational trips versus utility trips, or some other things. You know, if somebody's going to the grocery store at the other end of the greenway, they might ride in a different way than if they're going on a exercise trip or a recreational trip. So the point is that e-bikes kind of serve different types of trips, and people ride different types of bikes, e-bikes, conventional bikes, in different ways depending on what's going on. Okay, and so the nice thing about a bike share e-bike is BCycle kind of control they control how the system operates, and they have some oversight over it. They can help educate users about norms, about etiquette. People for Bikes is doing a lot of great work in that area also. And as part of it is growing pains as new riders are coming into the fold. They're learning how to operate on a shared environment. And I think that the more people out there modeling and demonstrating good behavior, the better it is for everyone in the end.
It's a really interesting point about e-bicyclists, maybe moving a little bit slower even on greenways or paths. So it's a good point to share. I feel like our time is going by so quickly. So I want to be sure that we get to some questions that have been submitted. And so Elise, I'm going to pull you back into the conversation to help field some of those questions.
Awesome, I'm happy to. I know that a number of questions were answered kind of by Mackenzie and Alicia, but if there's other ones, feel free to dump them in the Q&A. All you got to do is click that button and kind of type out your question for us. But one thing that did come up that I'm also curious about, because I don't know offhand, when it comes to Nashville buses, so the MTA system WeGo, can it haul e-bikes? Do Michael or Lindsay, do you know the answer to that? Like, can you put an e-bike on a bus and kind of wander that way?
I didn't know the answer, but I saw someone in the chat, Chris said 55 pounds is the limit on Metro bus racks. So, I mean, current limit, it seems like, but that also goes to the point of the importance of having a docked system like BCycle as part of the bike share system too. Like, I see a model in the future where we're thinking about always citing our busiest bus stops, and actually like the new transit centers that WeGo's building. We have 2 transit centers under construction in Nashville, like thinking about how we're integrating a bike share system into those designs of those transit centers. So at our busiest bus stops, always thinking about how we're integrating the docked bike share system with the bus stop, also with all kinds of pedestrian infrastructure and improvements that don't exist right now too.
Yeah. Awesome, perfect. I know in other cities I've been in, I've definitely put an e-bike on the front of the bus, and I see a couple of people in the chat are saying that they have as well. And yeah, Nashville BCycle is already kind of in the plans for the North Nashville hub, so that's exciting. And I just was talking a lot with Green Hills folks to talk about their transit center or transit hub down there as well. So I think there's definitely alignment with us and WeGo, as long as we want to be working together and there's funding to support it. But yeah, more questions. Sarah Michaels asked, I'm curious if anyone here has thoughts about how cities in the US can get to the same level of cycling in European cities like Amsterdam, Paris, etc. When it comes to cycling infrastructure, safety being a given priority, and this person remains hopeful. But yeah, do you guys have any, how can we in the US kind of get to where they are in more European cities? What are your thoughts there?
I have thoughts. So People for Bikes really wants the US to be the best bicycling nation in the world. And we know that infrastructure is a huge piece of that. And I think we have a great opportunity right now coming out of COVID, knowing that our cities have transitioned a bit from being so incredibly car centric to slightly more people power mobility centric. So People for Bikes has a city ratings program that rates cities from across the world on their bicycling infrastructure. A really great way to know if you are the best nation in the world for bicycling is to measure things. So this is kind of our first kind of foundational work on, all right, so what does infrastructure look like in Nashville versus Amsterdam versus Copenhagen versus places across Asia. Obviously, there's a lot of difference around the world in terms of what infrastructure looks like and how bikes are used. It doesn't have to look like Copenhagen everywhere, but I think we need to be really thoughtful about how the US infrastructure was created, how different that is from Europe, how different that is from Asia. So getting those baseline kind of numbers in terms of, okay, so this city has this many miles of connected infrastructure, and this is the type of infrastructure that people are using, is really important. And then I'll also make the note of, we talk a lot about cities and urban infrastructure, but bikes, and especially e-bikes, have the ability to go much farther than just this urban kind of context. So can we think about non-paved and natural surface trails as a form of infrastructure? How do e-bikes help expand what these e-bike networks can look like and bike networks can look like? I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And it is a big goal of People for Bikes to build this infrastructure.
Awesome. Lindsay, can you do a quick answer of, are e-bikes allowed on greenways? I know that was answered in the chat, but I feel like there has been this confusion level around it. But yeah, if you want to do a quick answer of that, and I'm going to pull up some more of the questions that we got.
Yeah. So class 1 and class 2 e-bikes, and that includes Nashville BCycle bikes, are allowed on greenways. So hop on, ride on. They are definitely allowed. There was a moment, if you're confused, there was a moment that was confusing for all of us, but we do have that model legislation that Ash mentioned in her beginning remarks here in Tennessee. So cities and municipalities like Nashville have to allow class 1 and class 2 e-bikes on multi-use path unless there's a documented safety case to not allow them. And there is no such documented safety case in Nashville. So right now, hop on your class 1, class 2 e-bike or your Nashville BCycle and use the greenways. But there is a speed limit. I saw this in the chat too. Everyone keep in mind 15 miles an hour. So we definitely want to encourage everybody to obey the speed limit.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that. There was a question earlier from Carrie, and he had a couple of questions, but the first one was, does the statistical data on e-bike sales include the D2C companies, or are they just the ones sold in IBDs? Those are acronyms that I don't know. So let's clue me in on those acronyms also.
Yes, good acronyms. DTC means direct to consumer. IBD means independent bike dealer, which is like brick and mortar. So the data that I'm referring to is from NPD, who actually, I forget what their acronym is, but they're an independent consulting group that compiles this. Chris probably knows. Most of that data is from brick and mortar sales. So we know that we are not capturing a significant amount of e-bike data in terms of what the market looks like. Like, we think it might be as much as 2/3 more than what that data shows. So that is a big initiative of People for Bikes, is to start gathering that direct to consumer data as well.
All right. I do appreciate when I love the acronym lingo language, but then sometimes I need people to tell me. So thanks for the explanation of that also. And I hope it was helpful for other people listening and tuned in too. So another question that came in the chat earlier was, I've contacted my representatives asking for more safe bike walk infrastructure, and they attached some data studies to back up those thoughts. But how else can we, people in Nashville and people of the public, push for these projects and to get them funded? Like any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I know we have some council members on the webinar today. I saw Councilmember Henderson and Councilmember Berkeley Allen introduce themselves in the chat. So I would definitely encourage people to contact their local Metro Council member here in Nashville. We're just about to really get the annual Metro budget process underway here in Nashville. And there's actually next Tuesday is a public comment period for people that want to share what's important to them with the Metro Council in this upcoming budget cycle. You can actually, I think the deadline might have passed to sign up. It might have been yesterday. One of the council members, if you're still on, you can put it in the chat. But really right now, point being, because you probably couldn't come in person next Tuesday anyway, is write your Metro Council member, send them an email, tell them that biking infrastructure is important to you, because it really does make a difference in my experience for the decision makers that are making decisions about the resources and how much money to put towards different infrastructure. And this isn't just, also I'll add, we always need more capital dollars to build infrastructure, but we also need funding for operations and maintenance too. So I also saw a question in the chat about bike lane sweeping that I can provide a more detailed update on that too, but you know, we need to be building more bike infrastructure, but we also need to be designing and planning for more bike infrastructure in the future. We need to be bringing more of that talent in-house to our, you know, our public servants, our Metro employees. So we need to have more staff at our new department, Nashville Department of Transportation. And then we need to have more staff and resources for maintaining the facilities we do have to keep them safe and swept and clean. So it is a matter of resources and priorities, and the council members hearing from you about it being important to you is really important. It's actually really important right now in the next few weeks. So.
Thanks, Lindsay. There was I'm just firing through these to make sure people can get their questions heard and answered. There was a question earlier pertaining to safety and e-bikes, and it was, are there concerns about e-bikes and the number of pedestrians or biking accidents or deaths in Nashville? Are there comments locally or on a broader scale from you all?
I don't know about Nashville, but I know on a broad scale, there's very few kind of documented crashes between e-bikes, micromobility vehicles, whatever, bicyclists even, and pedestrians. It happens. Yes, it is in the data set. There's some issue that, of course, like any accident or crash, it happens. Okay, but it is not. It's not something that rises to the level that Consumer Product Safety Commission is like intervening, like lawn darts or something like that. Okay, so that's an important thing to think about. It's and so a lot of these issues get back to etiquette, perception, and perception is important. Conflicts and are important, and one of the best things that I've experienced and I've seen in other areas is when you have really high quality infrastructure that addresses conflicts, people use it as it was designed, and conflicts occur less often. Okay, so this means separated bike facilities, crosswalks, stop bars, signals for pedestrians, and on the Greenways side, speed limits and other things, and frankly, more infrastructure to distribute users a little more. Okay.
Awesome, thanks for that. There were a couple of questions specifically about bike share. So maybe I get to answer a couple of questions. But so Eric Hoke in the chat just now asked, since BCycle isn't government, how will it coordinate with planning, WeGo, NDOT, TDOT, and to expand the network? And then also Carrie asked a question about what's the current situation with the expansion of bike share with different companies. So both BCycle, Lime, and Lyft. So I don't know if these are two that I can help answer, and also you all can chime in too. I don't know Lime and Lyft's situation, but I can speak to BCycles, and since we aren't necessarily government. So we do operate a metro program. We are a subcontractor of NDP, who is contracted to run the bike share system. So technically it's a metro program, and we're the people who are operating and servicing it. So I think we're willing to coordinate with planning and WeGo and all the right parties as much and as closely as they'd like us to be, because our whole business is about building a good bike share system that is useful to as many people as possible. And I think with some of the new technology that we're bringing on, with the new technology that we're bringing online with these new kind of smart docks, these 3.0 docks, I think that's going to make things a lot more affordable, a lot more kind of scalable. So you can do more neighborhood or residential based sort of setups that don't need a huge footprint or a huge capital investment. But I think that, as we think about not just the city or just the core or certain parts, if we think about expansion outward for the whole county, that there's a lot that has to be connected to NDOT and WeGo and TDOT and everybody in planning and all of that. So we want to be as closely aligned as anyone else, as anyone will allow us to be, and to continue running this program. But if anybody has can answer Carrie's questions of Lime and Lyft, feel free to chime in.
So at least I don't know the answer on Lime and Lyft, but I do want to bring up one point related to BCycle's longevity within Nashville. And I think you know this, but I know I was around when Communities Putting Prevention to Work grant was done at the health department that really got BCycle launched and going. Do you know when that date was? I'm thinking it was 2012 or somewhere in that time frame.
2012, implemented 2013.
Yeah. So that system with the to the lack of a better word, just manual bike, a regular bike, really served the city really well for almost 10 years. And the docking stations have held up and are some of the ones that are still in place. And so I just wanted to mention that because I think some know that history, but others, may be new and don't realize that BCycle had been here for a really long time, and really for a small amount of money that was invested in the system to keep it going. It's really proven to be very useful and really lived a long life since we're now in 2022.
Cool. Well, sweet. I appreciate that chime in. From Eric Hoke earlier, was there and this might be an Ash question, was there a federal tax break for e-bikes in the Build Back Better bill?
Yes, there was. It was called the E-Bike Act. It is currently looking for a new vehicle to move it forward. There are an incredible amount of incentives happening at the state and local level currently. Chris, I'm pretty sure you worked on that research that said there were 50 plus either current or lapsed e-bike incentive programs across North America. Really incredible momentum at the state level for this. And then we're just hoping that, we're not hoping, we're actively working on advocating for the E-Bike Act to be included in new legislation happening this year.
Awesome. Thank you. To chug along. So not really a question, more of a recommendation from Al Willis. One thing that would make urban riding more appealing and safe, at least in Nashville, is to have better coordination and response from the roads and streets department to semi-regular clean bike lanes. So many bike lanes are cluttered with rock, glass, sticks, and other debris in Nashville's case. So do you have any comments about that, Lindsay? And then kind of connected to that, there was a question about, how do we make sure bike lanes are kept free from like rideshare and delivery vehicles? Maybe those two things could be kind of addressed simultaneously by you and then the other members of the panel.
Yeah, I mean, a bike lane is only as useful, if it's free of debris, clean, and free of being blocked by various vehicles. So there's a couple of things. I think I definitely encourage people. It feels frustrating and maybe pointless, but it isn't. When you get off your bike after you see a bad condition, report it to the hub 311. They do respond to those requests. If it feels like we aren't maintaining the bike lanes, and I see Councilmember Henderson has a long comment in the chat on this too. We haven't been. There's been plans for a long time for Metro to purchase a bike lane sweeper. It got delayed. If there's an update in the recently released Walk and Bike strategic plan saying that they will purchase the bike lane sweeper in 2022. And I think Councilmember Henderson's comment said they did. I know they're staffing up. There was a line in the operating budget last year to have a sweeper maintenance team. And I think they are trying to move staff around to address it. So I'll say that, use the system we have to the extent you can to report issues. Certainly let me know. I've put my email in the chat a bunch of times, but it's just Lindsay at Walk Bike Nashville. And I'm happy to try to advocate and alert various staff at NDOT to the issues too. But I think right now we've been promised that, the sweeper's coming, there's more staff coming. I think folks within Metro are aware of the issue, but I think it helps to continually report it and continue to try to make them more aware of the issue. And it goes back to the budget and resources question we were talking about too. Like we need to have the operating and maintenance budget so that we can maintain the facilities we're building too.
Perfect. I think there was one lingering one that I still could see, which was question that is, and I don't know, it's maybe more of a request. It would be interesting to see both non-e-bike and e-bike sales by demographics in the US. So kind of, with some of the slides that Ash was sharing earlier, there was a request for a little bit more information versus non-e-bike and e-bike sales there. Oh, we got one more question. Yeah, feel free to keep, like, if you have, there's no silly questions here, feel free to throw them in the chat if you still have them. But some developer put BCycle stations on plans and have shown them in public meetings to show they are a bike-friendly developer and then have built their projects without them. Are there any steps we can take to have these developers follow through? That's a good question. Yes, I wonder, like, I'd be curious about the timing on when they put the plans in place and were showing them. And was the next step 2020 happening in 2020 when BCycle went away? I'd be curious about some of that. But I think with, better connections to the to NDOT and to some of the planning staff, there might be more of a incentive or directive to follow through on some of those transportation or bicycling infrastructure, like on development sort of plans. I think too, like I was saying earlier, with the affordability of some of the new equipment might also make things a little bit easier for developers to finalize and follow through to the next step. So yeah, I'm not sure. Again, I'm 6-7 months into this position, so I'm not sure which developers and which properties exactly, but I'm happy to follow up on it and to kind of better address it and kind of get us through to the follow through of having stations or new docks in place. So that's a good question.
And at least I can just mention that if someone's aware of that issue, definitely if it's a project that's like a specific plan, zoning, contact the planning department. And I don't think anyone's overlooking anything, but definitely if there's questions on that, reach out to planning staff and they'd be happy to answer any questions related to requirements around bike share infrastructure that was part of a development proposal.
So Elise, this is the question, I'm going to ask a question quickly. Is there an opportunity if developers or employers or private property owners want to partner with BCycle? Is there a way that you all are able to create or form those kind of partnerships?
Absolutely. I think that's how a lot of new stations will be coming online, with like private property, private development, and in addition to working with the city. So yeah, that just be contacting us and kind of walking through different options and pricing and all of the what comes with that. Yeah, that would just be contacting me specifically.
And there's some existing developments where that has been done. I think the one at the Hill Center in Sylvan Park has a BCycle station that was part of that development as it was put in. And I think at the time they worked with the BCycle organization when it was just with Downtown Partnership to do that. And they funded that.
Perfect. There are two questions in the chat that are kind of maybe the same to me. I'm reading them the same. And it's about, when will the docking stations be returned to the Greenways? And the other is Ted Road's BCycle station being restored to function as it was discontinued after mandates and restrictions in 2019? So both of those, the Greenway stations, so any BCycle station that's along a Greenway or on a property managed by Parks, we kind of suspended temporarily as Parks wanted to be a little bit more comfortable and then kind of look into and evaluate like the safety and et cetera when it comes to e-bikes. And so we are hoping to bring those back online in April. We want to do that, in good faith and in partnership with Parks and with the city. So we're kind of navigating the inner workings of that right now, but I'm hoping to bring those Park stations and those Greenway stations online this spring. So in April, I am advocating for that to make sure that they are available to the public to use, because right now they're just sitting empty and that's not really benefiting anybody. So yeah, I want to restore that network for you, and I'm advocating for that. And I know that we have a number of council members and other folks that work for Metro that are supportive of that. And I think Parks just needs to is trying to kind of be as comfortable as they can with where we're at. And I think the latest recommendations coming from the Greenways commissions and the park board who supported the latest recommendations would be supportive of reopening, but I cannot speak for them. I like these BCycle specific questions. A couple more things came into the chat about, does BCycle still close at 10 p.m.? Or what was the last hour I can use a BCycle? You can use a BCycle 24/7, 365. I'm sorry that you had that 10 o'clock cutoff before. When I came in, I learned about that and I was like, no way, that goes away. So you can use a BCycle 24/7, 365. You do need to return the bike to a station, of course, and follow the rules of your pass, but you can use it after 10 p.m. And then there's another question in here. I see in the comments that Spin, Bird, and Lime are scheduled to start dockless e-bike share in the next few months. There will be a number, will there be number limits, parking regulations, etc. for this, correct? And are these plans in development? Those are good questions. I don't know the answer to that. I know that there is, this that they will be bringing dockless e-bikes into the city. I just have no idea what the timeline is on that and the likelihood of it or any of that plan.
I can speak to that for a minute. So as part of, you might remember, we had an explosion of scooters for a minute where we had a number of different companies operating within Nashville. The city sort of brought that back in and did an RFP process to choose 3 contractors to operate scooters within Nashville. And so part of that not to use the acronym, request for proposals, a public procurement process to choose 3 vendors. They chose 3 vendors, and they required in that contract and in the proposals for those vendors to also bring e-bikes, because leadership within the city, the mayor's office, and the Transportation Licensing Commission felt that was an important component of bringing scooters, was also having them bring e-bikes. So it's in the contract. My understanding is it's in the works, and they're working through the details. So the entity in charge of that is the Transportation Licensing Commission. And so I would encourage anybody with questions about that to get in touch with the Transportation Licensing Commission and sort of ask for an update on when we might expect those vendors to bring e-bikes.
Thanks for that, Lindsay. I think that is. Oh, dockless. Dockless means that somebody had a question about what does dockless mean, and it just means that so there's station-based micromobility, bike share, scooter share, that kind of thing, and then there's dockless, which would be if you can leave it anywhere essentially. You don't have to return it to a specific like station or kind of holster or anything like that. You can kind of when you're done riding the thing, you can kind of leave it where you are essentially.
I did see one more question in the chat, Elise, about plans for future of last mile deliveries on e-bikes. About, I think we're talking like private deliveries like Amazon or DoorDash or things like that. I don't have the answer. I was maybe.
Yeah, so I'll chime in on that one. First of all, this is something that's blowing up across most cities. Is everybody wants a DoorDash or a Amazon delivery to their front door in real time, and e-bikes have proven to be a pretty good way of doing that. And in Tennessee, we did a study funded by Tennessee DOT, actually looking at last mile trikes using electric trikes. Okay, and so they were interested in some of the models that have been developed with small kind of urban freight hubs, essentially getting distributed out on last mile trikes. The way you can love or hate electric trikes, but the reason that's important is an electric trike is not a single unit truck or a big rig or even a UPS or Amazon type truck that's parked in the bike lane, essentially. Okay, so these things can actually provide that sort of service, and they don't struggle with some of that pressure on curb space and other things that a lot of cities are dealing with. So our study was kind of in response to last mile urban dense core freight logistics and how e-trikes and even e-bikes could potentially help in that area. So there's something there, and there's a lot of pilots going out. There are companies that are kind of established and have been doing this for years that we've worked with. And then there's other sort of innovative models that have gone out of, that have come out of even East Tennessee. So those are all out there, and even TDOT's looking at them as a kind of I don't know if the pressure's high enough yet in Nashville or Knoxville for that matter, but it's coming, and there's got to be some other model besides sending big trucks in to deliver small packages.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I think I think we kind of closed out our Q&A. I do want to say, Councilmember Allen, I saw your post in the chat about traditional and electric assist bikes. I just want to say that I saw it. But yeah, I will hand it back to Michael to kind of get some, I guess, closing kind of things. But yeah, I'll hand it back to Michael. And then I do want to say thank you to everybody who kind of posted in the chat, in the Q&A, et cetera, with their questions. Very appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Elise. This is a great conversation. I think we could easily fill a whole afternoon with questions and good discussion from firsthand experiences. So this is a really interesting topic. I want to thank our panelists today. So Lindsay, Chris, and Ash, thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and perspective on this topic. I do want to leave it to where you all have an opportunity to provide any closing thoughts. So Lindsay, let's start with you.
Oh man, you got me just as I was putting in the chat a blog post because I wasn't sure you were going to give us that chance. So I'm just really excited about the future of e-bikes and bike share in Nashville. I really am. I know I've said that a couple times today, but personally, I wasn't familiar at all with e-bikes until the debate really started heating up here in Nashville about whether or not to allow e-bikes on greenways. And so kind of pushed me, and then BCycle coming back too. I've had the opportunity to ride BCycles, and it really does, just from personal experience I can speak, make such a huge difference. I love Ash's quote about them being joy machines. I think I'm gonna pick that up too, and use that. And I just think there's so much potential, and so much joy and transportation options that we can bring to Nashvillians, with some public investment, some prioritization of our infrastructure, and like maybe a bit of an open mind about what e-bikes can bring. So like looking ahead, I'm thinking about two big policy issues for Nashville, like if we really want to make e-bikes more accessible. And one is investing in the bike share system and the expansion of the bike share system, and making sure that that's a priority for our mayor, our council members, for our developers that came up, for big employers like Vanderbilt that we're thinking about how, and for our transit system in general, for WeGo too. So we're thinking about how we're integrating the bike share system into the transportation mix here in Nashville. And then the second one is a little more specific, but I think it's really important too, is thinking about our greenways and how we use them and how we define them. And if we continue to think about them as linear parks, I think we're limiting some of the uses of our greenway system. And if they are linear parks, then I think we have to think about how we're planning our on-street bike facilities a bit differently, and making sure that there's redundant infrastructure for our greenways. So that's a big policy question, and one that we'll definitely be watching at Walk Bike Nashville. And it seems pretty specific, but we also have a number of big important planning efforts happening right now, like the East Bank planning study, where these decisions about how we classify the type of infrastructure, whether it's a greenway or an on-street bike facility, will have impacts in daily commutes and the growth of bicycling for years to come. So it's an important time to have these bigger policy conversations and making sure we're keeping in mind making e-bikes and bicycling accessible to as many Nashvillians as possible.
Those are really good thoughts. Yeah, there's a lot changing in the city, so we would expect then transportation to also be changing along with it. So, Chris, any last thoughts?
Yeah, so first of all, I've been studying e-bikes with maybe a critical eye for the last 15 years of my career, the only 15 years of my academic career, basically. And the more I investigate, the more I see so much upside. It's undeniable that they are about the best environmental mode of motorized transportation that's out there. They have the motor assist. I mean, they take almost zero energy to recharge and so on, not almost zero, but a very minuscule amount of energy. And from a greenhouse gas perspective, all the things that cities are trying to mitigate, greenhouse gases, energy, safety, e-bike riders don't kill pedestrians at the rate cars do. They don't contribute to fatal crashes, okay, in the scale that we've been seeing across Tennessee and across Nashville. And so, and that back to the billboard, you're part of the problem, you're part of the congestion. E-bikes aren't part of that problem. E-bikes aren't part of the congestion. E-bikes aren't part of parking MOAs and all the land that is devoted to parking and storing cars. So a couple other things, health. E-bikes help people get out, get physical activity, get mental health. To Ash's point, they're fun. It's okay for transportation to be fun. It's great for transportation to be fun. I commute by a conventional bicycle. I'm out on the greenways. I'm enjoying my time, just like all the people out having fun. I've got an eagle eye for e-bikes because I study these things. So I see folks on e-bikes. I see a lot of folks on e-bikes that may not be out in that space, but for the e-bike. So yes, there are growing pains. Yes, there are issues we've got to deal with and address and attack, maybe even if you're looking at it as like a surgeon, solving some problems. But the upside is too good to just have the blunt instrument of, kill the patient. So those are the sorts of things that I really think that policymakers need to think about. What are their goals as a city elected official or an engineer or a planner? What is the broad goal that we're trying to satisfy for our community? And e-bikes contribute to a lot of those. So as a non-e-bike owner, I'm hugely supportive of e-bikes because of all the things that they can provide to the transportation and the blurred line across to the recreation side.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's one way of meeting a lot of our sustainability, health, wellness goals as a city and as individuals that we all have. Ash, do you have any last thoughts to share?
Just thanks for the opportunity. This has been such a great conversation. It's always so wonderful to get to talk about e-bikes, and particularly on the ground, seeing kind of the impacts they can have on different communities, getting people outside. I'm not going to say it better than Lindsay or Chris did. So thanks again so much for allowing me to be part of this conversation. If you want more information about e-bikes, peopleforbikes.org, we've got a lot of great resources on there. So thanks again.
Yeah, and thank you, and thank all three of you for taking the time again today. Elise, I'll hand it back over to you to talk about closing remarks and next steps.
Yeah, no, if I could give you a round of applause without it being terrible on the echoing nature of it, I would. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to our incredible panel and for sharing their time and their expertise, and to you, Michael, our moderator, for kind of guiding us through this conversation and having such great connection points and questions in general. Thank you to Ayumi. Look at this incredible illustration that we have, like all the notes that we needed to gather from our conversation. Thank you so much for scribing. So yeah, thank you to all of you who participated and joined in. And we got a kind of nice spring day and you decided to stay inside and stare at your screen with us. So I'm very, very grateful to you all for kind of chiming in and listening in and asking lots of great questions and getting us to think about and discuss a lot of good stuff. So yeah, I hope you all are feeling more informed and excited about electric bikes and the potential transformational kind of power and making it easier and more accessible for more people to bike, because I think that's what it's all about, is encouraging more folks to choose a bike more often and making it easier for them to do so. From the bike that they're using to the infrastructure that they're riding on to the network and the community that they're a part of. I think that's the whole gist of all of this. So thank you very, very much. And thank you to our co-hosts at Walk Bike too, for kind of tag teaming this with us. Thank you so much for all of this. So that's it. That's all. We'll share out this recording of the conversation. We'll share out the notes. And yeah, if you have any questions, everybody kind of provided contact information and where you can reach them and learn more. So thank you. Awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day.